A very warm welcome to today's lecture. The topic for today's lecture is Political Processes in India Developmental. Today's host is Dr. Manisha Mirdha, and this topic will be divided into two parts through which we will try to understand the concept of political processes in India. In fact, if we look into the topic, this topic entails and encompasses the entire process of the state, the kind of governance, the nexus between the two and everything. So, we will try to have a holistic understanding of these political processes. To begin with, by now we have had a understanding of what is the nature, scope, perspectives of the state and how the state has evolved. In this program, we propose to study the political processes in the Indian context and the issues involved. In this kind of discussion, one has to take into account the special nature of the state-society relationship in a developing state like India. Besides, there are other issues such as the evolution of the idea of Indian state as evolved during the national movement. So, to begin with, it's very important to understand the relationship between the state and the society, and especially in a country like India, which has evolved over time and has been preceded by the national movement, the constitutional mandate for it, the goals as set out by the constitution and the constitution makers, the working of the Indian state as reflected in the experiments with concepts like federalism, coalition government, bureaucracy, developmental administration, judiciary, to name a few. In all these influences, the problems of democratic participation, socio-political mobilization and governance. We all know that we had been under British imperialism for 200 years. The British came to India in 1600 as the East India Company. They got the Farman to establish a factory in Surat in the fort of Jahangir, and the rest is history. So, we had been ruled for 200 years. Finally, in 1946, the Constitutional Assembly was created, which set out the motion to create a free India. And finally, in 1947, we gained our independence. So, it's been a very struggling journey for India, and the developmental processes reflect the entire trajectory of that. So, the role of the state is perhaps the most dominant theme of political disagreement amongst thinkers, reflecting different views about the proper relationship between the state, society and the individual. Before we get more deeper into the understanding of the Indian state, we also have to understand that the concept of state, society and the individual has been quite intricate. While all the political thinkers, with the exception of anarchists probably, have regarded the state as a worthwhile or necessary association, they have profoundly disagreed about the exact role that the state should play in the society. So, except for the anarchists, as I said, who do not agree to the concept of state at all, apart from them, all of the other views which have been there have endorsed the idea of state, even if it is a very minimalistic state. So, at one extreme in this debate are the classical liberals who have argued that individuals should enjoy the widest possible freedom and therefore insisted that the state should play a very minimal role. The minimal role is simply to provide a framework of peace and social order within which citizens can conduct their lives at the best. Now, these minimalist states with institutional apparatus restricted to a little more than a police force, court system and army commonly existed in the 19th century. In the 20th century, however, they became rare, and the dominant trend has been for the state's role to expand. Progressively, this has occurred in response to electoral pressures for economic and social security, supported by a broad ideological coalition including democratic socialists, modern liberals and paternalistic conservatives. Now, we have always, as a country, we have always believed in a welfare state. And what we mean by a welfare state is that we are committed to the basic security provisions, basic survival provisions, without killing the incentive to compete and thrive. So India is a welfare state, but this kind of a amalgam of heritage plus modern development was difficult to progress through. So Indian society tried to create a space for the idea of the modern nation state in the Indian culture, along with the traditional concept of the state. So till now we have been to a large extent successful in retaining our culture, our heritage, and still marching quite progressively ahead in the entire race of internationalism. Today we are the emerging third largest economy of the world. We are the largest democracy of the world, and we've come a long way. So therefore we can say that it was difficult to visualize that this concept of state would eventually totally marginalize the indigenous concept and become the hegemonic concept. The process was held by the colonial inheritance of the imperial state structure, which has shaped much of the relationship of the state with the rest of the society. Indian constitutional state emerged in 1947 after one of the world's most novel and long drawn struggles for political emancipation. The leading elite in Indian nationalist struggle and the founding fathers of Indian National Congress were profoundly enamored of Western influence. The party developed a nationalist, state-centered, secular ideology. Its conversion to socialism was actually concomitant with accession to power, and this conversion gave the party a way to adapt to the requirements of state construction. It led to the creation of a stronger state for the precise purpose of overcoming the traditional order, which was segmented both regionally and socially. The underdeveloped country was vulnerable, diversified, fragmented, and differing in various areas, and the state created tried to overcome these problems of the country. The constitution adopted in 1950 turned India into a secular parliamentary democracy with a bicameral parliament and a multi-party system, an indirectly elected president, an independent judiciary, and a federal structure with partial separation of the powers and responsibilities between the center and the state. Now, I've used a few words over here. Let us also try to gain an understanding of these terms. So, when I say that India turned into a secular country, what exactly it means? It means that we decided that we would not be supporting any religion. For the country, all religions were equal. We call ourselves a parliamentary democracy. This was basically to ensure that we work as a cooperative federalism, and there is a strong tandem between the executive and the legislature. We call ourselves a bicameral parliament, which basically means that we have two houses, the upper house and the lower house, which we call the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. Then we are a multi-party system. Now, what exactly does this mean when we call ourselves a multi-party system? Which means that there is no one single party hegemony which exists in our country. The elections are always contested by various multi-parties. We are an indirectly elected president. Now, what do we mean when we say we have this indirectly elected president? So, the election of the president is not based on the actual system of adult franchisee that we adopt for the other ministers. For the election of the president, we follow the system of single transferable vote through proportional representation. This ensures that there is equal representation, and we have an electoral college for this. We also have independent judiciary. It's very important that in a federal structure, there is an independent judiciary which has the right to review the constitutional amendments. And then we have a federal structure with partial separation of powers and responsibilities between the center and the state. Now, what is a federal structure? A federal structure is something where the powers between the center and the state are clearly demarcated. There are specific territories and specific jurisdictions of the center and the state. We decided to be a federal state. We had come out of a unitary system, but considering the kind of diversities which were existing, the kind of fragmented population that we had, it was realized that it was better to have a federal structure. However, the critics have also very strongly pointed out that we are not a federal structure, we are not a true federation. Some have called it a bargaining federalism, some have called it a cooperative federalism, and different terms have been given. Some say we are a federal state with a unitary bias, and some have called it to be a quasi-federal state, which we will be discussing further. So, our federal state has been understood differently by different scholars. However, the fact cannot be denied that we have clear separate powers and jurisdictions of the center and the state. The state aimed at a comprehensive form of justice, equality and dignity of the individual. It rooted in the people the ultimate source of its legitimacy and provided them certain fundamental rights that could not be alienated or abrogated even by the parliament. They, however, were subject to national security and general welfare. So, we have a strong system which ensures our fundamental rights. Along with that, of course, we have a fundamental duties also. The Constitution also contains directive principles of state policy under which the state was to strive to secure a social order oriented to people's welfare, ensure means of livelihood for all citizens, achieve a use of the material resources of the community that promoted common good, prevent harmful concentration of wealth, ensure equal pay for equal work for both men and women, and protect children and youth from exploitation. So, these DPSPs, as they are more popularly known as, which are actually 16 in number and they range between Article 36 to 51. The classification of these directive principles is in 3 sections and they provide guideline to secure protection, welfare, development, growth. These DPSPs are, however, not justiciable by the court, so that criticism has been there against it. However, they have been a guiding light to explain the country towards its governance. Moving further, we talk about the political processes and the constitutional arrangements in India. As I said, we adopted a federal form of system, which was definitely a strong historical advancement. The federal configuration under the present constitution and its tangible operations can be grasped only on the broad canvas of its long expedition. And today's lecture actually showcases federalism in India in a twofold modus: the history of federalism in India and the federal scheme under the present day Constitution of India. The term federal is derived from the Latin word fidus, which means covenant, and also to let you know that from this Latin word fidus has also arisen another word which is confederation, and there is a difference between the term federation and a confederation. Federation, as I said, has 2 layers of government, 2 or more layers of governance. Similarly, confederation would also have 2 or more layers of governance. However, the difference is that in a confederation, the units are stronger than the center, which is the opposite of a federation. In a federal state, the center has the core power and the peripheral powers are given to the states. However, in a confederation, the center is weaker and the states have stronger power. A good example of a confederation could be UN itself, or for that matter NATO or European Union. All of these could be good examples of a confederation. Coming back to federation, federation embodies ideas of promise, obligation, undertaking, and consequently the federal idea draws on collaboration, reciprocity and mutuality. Federalism is a method of segregating powers so that the central and the local governments are each within a domain, harmonizing and autonomous. So it ensures that these two contradictory principles are reconciled, which is harmonizing and autonomous. Federal state ensures this kind of reconciliation. To put it more lucidly, federalism postulates a constitutional apparatus for bringing unity in diversity by toning the divergent forces of centripetal and centrifugal trends in the country for the attainment of conjoint national targets. So, therefore, it is very important that we have a complete understanding of federation again. Federation ensures that both the center and the state have their own jurisdictions, which is embodied in the constitution itself. A very important aspect of a true federation is a clear provision in the written constitution. So, the states get their independence that they want, however, they work cooperatively. The nature of the federal state might differ from country to country. Say, for example, India is a federal state and so is US. But then there is a strong and a clear difference between the federative characteristics of India and the federative characteristics of US. In fact, US could be called a true federation where clear demarcation and separation of powers is embodied. It is not so clearly here in our country for very apparent reasons, because we are still a nation in progress. Especially when the constitution was made, we had just come out of the spell of British imperialism. So it was very much required that we have a strong center, at the same time ensuring that the states have their own independence. The classic definition of federalism is that offered by K.C. Ware, who describes the federal principle as the method of dividing powers so that the general and the regional governments are each within a sphere coordinate and independent. A similar definition of federalism was offered by A.V. Dicey, who identified the three leading characteristics of a completely developed federalism as including the distribution of powers amongst governmental bodies, along with the supremacy of the constitution and the authority of the courts as the interpreter of the constitution. If I go back again to A.V. Dicey, who has also popularized the term rule of law, he has talked about two basic requisites which are important for a federation to be. And what he says is that for a federation to be, it is very important that there are a body of states who are collected together by some sentiment of locality, same history, same race or something of the like, which makes it capable for them to have a common sentiment of nationality, which gives a common emotion of them belonging to the same nationality. And the second prerequisite which A.V. Dicey talks about is that along with this common nationality, there should also be a peculiar sentiment where they want unity but do not desire union. So that kind of ambiguity is there in the concept of federation, and which our own country also embodies. The constitution demarcated those subjects that could be legislated upon by the center, that is the union government, those by the states and those by both. In fact, we have the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, which has these three lists, the union list, the state list and the concurrent list, each having different number of subjects. The union having 97, state having 66, concurrent having 47. And issues like defense, foreign affairs, interstate communication, trade and commerce, currency, banking, control of industry, etc. are reserved for the union government, for the reason being that these are issues which are of central importance. At the same time, issues like public order, police, public health, education, agriculture, professions, etc. were reserved for the states, with this understanding that they are more within the ambit of the state administration. And the concurrent list includes items of legislation such as marriage and divorce, transfer of non-agricultural property, contracts, civil and criminal procedures, welfare, social security, and a lot of other issues. And the idea of the concurrent list is that it has subjects which are of importance to both the center and the state. So we have these clearly demarcated three lists in the 7th schedule: the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list, which again reflects the features of federation. The Constitution of India is unique with respect to its extreme detail and substance. The uniqueness of the Indian Constitution is also in the fact that although it is federal in character, it declares India to be a union of states. Now, quite interestingly, if you happen to look at the constitution of a country, you will find that though we are a federal nation, the term federation has never been used in the entire constitution. Instead, we prefer to call ourselves a union of state. So, therefore, there has been this view which says that we are a federation in normal times and unitary in times of emergencies. The constitution provides for a single citizenship like the United Kingdom, and unlike the United Kingdom, which provides for dual citizenship. So, like the UK, we have the constitution which gives a single citizenship. Now, UK is not a federal state. UK is a unitary state. It also has a single citizenship. We also have a single citizenship. US is a federation. It has a dual citizenship. We do not have. So, that is that unitary feature of a federation. Single citizenship gives the constitution a unitary facet where all citizens are united under one identity as Indian. So, there was a very strong reason for having single citizenship, which is actually a feature which defies the concept of federation. Federal states usually have dual citizenship, one for the center, one for the state. We do not have that. We follow single citizenship nomenclature. The Constitution of India establishes a dual polity with the jurisdiction of making laws on different subjects is divided between union and the state governments. The distinguishing feature here is the residual powers lie in the hands of the central government. This attribute, which is different from other countries, makes India a federalism which is a bit intricate to fathom. Now, what we mean over here is that one of the distinguishing features is that we have the residual powers. And what exactly is the meaning of residual powers? Residual powers are those powers which, if do not fall within the territory of the union list or the state list, something like, say for example, e-commerce. So, when the constitution was being drafted, the concept of e-commerce was not that thriving. So, therefore, they did not find a place for that. So, that is a concern which does not find place either in the union list or the state list. So, therefore, that becomes a topic of residual understanding or residual power. The constitutional character of federalism, and going ahead with the two-way analysis that we are doing, another feature that marks India to be a federal country in nature is the written constitution. So, though we have a single citizenship which is a unitary feature, however, we have a written constitution which is a very strong federal feature. And Indian constitution is the lengthiest and the bulkiest constitution in the world, which clearly defines everything from rights to remedies. This strengthens the federal nature of the country and assures security to the state and the citizens. The framers of a constitution had taken almost like 3 years to draft the constitution, and it is one of the most lengthiest and the most bulkiest of the constitution of the world. Some have called it to be a lawyer's paradise, some have called it to be something which was drafted only by the legal luminaries, which establishes the fact that it's such a complex document. However, the size of this constitution ensures that it just does not talk about the rights but the remedies also. The powers in the country are split amongst 3 pillars of democracy: the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. All these 3 props, if I can call them, are complementary and supplementary to each other, with an independent judiciary which is the upholder of the supremacy of the constitution and get to the bottom of disagreements flanked by the center and the state, or for that matter between two states also. This guarantees a stringent remedial system, and the Constitution of India is both stern and elastic at the same time. Now, what exactly we mean by stern and elastic at the same time? That the constitution of a country is stern or rigid, as we would say, for the reasons that amendments in the constitution are not that easy. And it was the idea of the framers of a constitution that there should not be constant changes in the constitution. At the same time, it's elastic and flexible because we are a nation in the move, and this is a living document. Constitution is a living document. It should have that amount of leeway for change also. So therefore, it is flexible in that respect. The Constitution provides for a bicameral legislature. As I said previously, the upper house Rajya Sabha and the lower house Lok Sabha. The Rajya Sabha is the stand-in for the states of Indian Federation, while the Lok Sabha represents the people of India as a whole. The Rajya Sabha, even though a less powerful chamber, is required to conserve the federal stability by protecting the interests of the states against the uncalled for interference of the state. Other than the aforesaid provisions, the following provisions of the Constitution clash with the federal nature of it. So, one of the provisions which actually poses a question mark on the federal spirit is that the Union has the power to make new states or alter the boundaries of existing states. In a federation, otherwise this is not allowed. The states cannot be allowed to have different names without their own consent. The center does not have that kind of right, but in our country the Union has the power to make new states, alter the boundaries of the state and give them new nomenclatures. Union has the power to make laws on state matters, and if both state and union adjudicate on a certain matter, the latter will prevail. So there are certain provisions where the interests of both might collide, and if this is the reason and if this is the case, then the will of the union would always prevail over the state will. And the emergency articles of the Constitution also give it a unitary character. So we have Article 352, we have Article 356, we have Article 360, which talks about the emergency provisions and which gives the power to the center to have their own jurisdiction in the state affairs also. The sense of federalism lies not in the constitutional structure but in the society itself. Federal government is a device by which the federal qualities of the society are articulated and protected. Federalism as a theory is based on the principle of relativity, pragmatism and empiricism, and it provides for the creation of various kinds of unions and the actual shape of federal scheme depending upon the type of social differentiation and the working of the party system. So what kind of federation a nation decides to be depends on so many factors: the people, the kind of geography that they have, the kind of history that they have, the kind of political parties that they have. All of these are the defining features which will give a character to the federal nature of the state. And of the numerous factors, political party system is probably one of the most important factors in the federalizing process, and the evolution of a constitutional system is generally shaped by the historically set character of the party system which operates in the concerned country. The nature and shape of the federal union is largely determined by political parties, which in turn affect the federal structure. So in fact, in part 2 of this topic, we will try to understand the party system of India vis-a-vis developmental political processes. And just to give a conclusion to today's lecture and to sum up what we spoke of today, we spoke of the political processes in Indian context. We spoke of the role of state in India. We talked about the Indian constitutional society and the political processes and the constitutional arrangements regarding that. And finally, the two-way analysis of Indian federation was discussed. In the coming slide, we will be discussing mostly about the political party system. Thank you. Have a great day.